So while I was trying to edit the last video, I ran into a tweet. And this is an interesting tweet. I want y'all to see it. So it comes in from this dude. They say, the Sundial from Anastar and the statue that appears in the Pokemon League could have a big relation between them. So here's a picture of the Sundial here. It's got these two arches and then a Pokeball symbol in the middle. We were wondering in the last video what it's supposed to be, why it's connected to Megastones. And you see that circle in the middle? It's actually supposed to be where at a specific point every day, it's like perfectly aligned west, I'd imagine. So that when the sun is setting at around 8 p.m., the sun hits right through that hole in the middle. And you get this cool radiant glow and the rings come up as well. And for some reason in this game, X and Y, when the sun is in this specific point, you start to find unique Megastones all over the region. What is the connection? Nobody freaking knows. That's what we were trying to talk about last video. But this tweet isn't about that. This tweet takes the Sundial here and compares it to this statue. Now, this is a statue we see in Pokemon X and Y. There's three of them. One looks like freaking death. One looks like some dog. But they're side ones. The main one is this statue that kind of represents the Pokemon League for some reason. And to this day, no one knows what the deal is. It almost sounds like when the Kalos region was being formed and when the Pokemon League was being established, that creature was known. It was some kind of venerated being, like a god of the Kalos region. There's no room for a god of the Kalos region with what we know. There's just a sleeping Xerneas and Yveltal. There's really no god Kalos prays to, you know, unlike Johto or Sinnoh. So it's always been curious to me what the frick that statue is. And what this tweet pointed out is, now you got a tinfoil up, but you also get the two arches and the Pokeball in the center. Now, for me, I'm gonna call the arches a coincidence. You can find anything if you're looking for it, right? But what's cool to me is when you look at that Pokeball symbol on the bottom. In an interesting way, that circular symbol does line up when you compare it to the Sundial. Using that as the basis, you can make the arches make more sense, as if this statued Pokemon is somehow representing the Sundial. And so I'm gonna give y'all a couple of ideas on this. The first is the Sundial, this big crystallized deposit. If you could strip all those crystals down, what if you would see a statue of that exact same Pokemon there? Almost like at some point in the past, something happened and all this mega evolution related energy grew all over it. This would have to go back thousands of years because no one in the modern day would know what's underneath the Sundial. Or we could level this up one further and say, if you got rid of the crystals, what if the actual Pokemon itself is immortalized there, like fossilized inside there? Now look at a picture of the Sundial and pretend that's real. Doesn't that sound mad eerie? So at 8 p.m. when the sun shines through, Megastones seem to fall down and no one realizes it's the doing, unconsciously, of this fossilized legendary Pokemon. And that brings you down to a thought process of imagining that to be the A legendary. But stuff doesn't really line up, right? Why is it called Pokemon Legends ZA? As if Zygarde is going to be fighting the A legendary. We already know Zygarde to be a good Pokemon. And even with what we saw in the leaks, there was no hints of Zygarde being bad in any form. The point shown with Zygarde is that when Xerneas and Yveltal are fighting, Zygarde makes sure none of them win, and that there's always an equal balance between life and death. And they even show that Zygarde is unbothered by Xerneas and Yveltal in moderate amounts, taking life from the Kalos region and blessing Kalos with life. Zygarde is okay with them playing their roles as life and death. So Zygarde is far from a bad Pokemon. It's a very orderly Pokemon. But you look at this statue and this doesn't look like it would be the bad Pokemon because there's a statue venerating it. And just the image you get from the sun shining through it and blessing the region makes it sound positive as well. Well, that's just what I wanted to talk about in this video. So y'all let me know your thoughts in the comments. But I suppose there's a couple ideas I could throw out here, which is that maybe Zygarde wants full control over the Kalos region. Maybe Zygarde, while it is meant to help us, and even in the Pokemon Z leaks, it looked like it would help you against Lysander. You know, we have to read between the lines to tell what Z was about. What if that's the first level of what Zygarde is? All the stuff I explained about how it maintains balance between life and death, what if ultimately it is maintaining its control over the Kalos region? And so if anything greater than Zygarde were to ever appear in Kalos, even if it wasn't a threat, suddenly Zygarde's the bad guy and wants to eliminate that. And so that's the only way I can paint a clash between a Zygarde and an A legendary depicted like this, where this is some holy Pokemon that the ancient Kalosians prayed to, and over time it lost a battle to Zygarde, ended up in this state, and now hundreds or thousands of years later, people don't even know what it is when they're talking about the Sundial. Some NPCs in the game also refer to there being a Moondial somewhere else. I don't know what that could be about. A moon is much more complicated than the Sundial here because the moon comes in different forms for every day of the month. So it's almost like the Moondial, if we were to have a Sundial lookalike like this, would only really work for an hour once a month, while the Sundial here is much more plentiful and works for an hour once a day. I want to maybe imagine that there was not too deep a purpose to the Moondial. It might have been something like they save it for Pokemon Z, where you can go to Southern Kalos, find the Moondial, and then they lock an extra 10 Megastones to this Southern Kalos that you can only see in Pokemon Z. I'm speculating through all of that, but that's what makes sense in my head for that. But if you wanted to have a different fun idea for what the purpose of a Moondial could be, if we're imagining the A legendaries in the Sundial, maybe the Moondial is kind of like the A legendaries Megastone, that at the peak of the month, at that one moment, it is when this sun god A legendary can trigger its ultimate mega evolution. But man, have we freaking tinfoiled up to say all that. And I suppose this leads me to one last idea I could talk about for this, which was something I think I discussed around the time Legends EA came out, unless I just didn't make the video. But it's an idea that while there is Xerneas and Yveltal, that there's actually something above them. Not Zygarde, an actual Pokemon that had both life and death energy, all in one Pokemon. And in some weird way, Xerneas and Yveltal are just mini versions of that. In the same way, Yveltal has a dormant form, the cocoon, and Xerneas has one, the tree. This could be the dormant form of this Pokemon, the cocoon equivalent, this giant crystal. And at some point, the same way Xerneas and Yveltal sleep for 800 years, that this is a Pokemon that is in its dormant form and maybe stuck that way. In the same way, Zygarde completely neutralizes life energy and death energy. It would also be able to neutralize the progenitor above this Xerneas and Yveltal, who has both of it. So in a war between this and Zygarde, Zygarde would beat it and leave it in this state. It's almost January, guys. We'll get some news soon. And so this brings me to two last things that are worth pointing out. One, well, this Sundial is an Anistar. So how specifically could it play a relevant role in Legends E if that's only in Lumiose? Unless this thing freaking wanders from Anistar and comes to Lumiose during the game. That's the first thing. The second thing is, you know, when you look at the statue, it kind of looks like perfect Zygarde as well. All this talk about some kind of Pokemon worth worshipping, Zygarde sounds like that. It sounds like in some turmoil that could have happened, that Zygarde would come to the rescue in its perfect form, people would see it make this statue in its image, and that's what you've got there. Who knows? I'm just trying to give y'all all the perspectives. Y'all let me know in the comments. Are we onto something, or are we crazy? Okay, are we a little crazy or are we really crazy?